Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. I am one of your co hosts. I am Casey.
I'm Sam. Let's get screaming.
Let's get screaming as we are joined on this podcast. We are joined in the basement, so to say, with Scream Queen, horror icon, and the star of such film, Pretty Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, her directorial debut, Personal Demons. We are joined by the one and only Brinke Stevens to discuss her work in the upcoming release of Ed Kemper, which, if you're listening to this on Friday, comes out in theaters today, which is based on the truly horrifying true crime tale.
Ed Kemper is based on the real life serial killer Edmund Kemper, who terrorized college campuses in the early 70s in a spree that earned him the nickname the Co-Ed Killer. Brink portrays Sally, Ed's final victim before his incarceration. Everyone, welcome horror royalty to the show, Brink Stevens. Brink, how are you doing?
Yay! Hi. I'm doing great, thank you. We're going to the cast and crew screening tonight.
That's
Yeah,
so
it's
exciting.
it's so exciting. I remember when we met you, that was last October, and I remember you telling us about this movie, Ed Kemper, and both Sam and I obviously knew the real life story, and
Mhm.
to hear that you were a part of it really excited both of us because it's a side of your work I don't know if we've really seen in your filmography, where you're working with something so true life horror. And like, this is a horrifying tale of Ed Kemper. So I'm curious, Brink, how much did you know about the real life story of Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, before you signed on to work on this picture?
I didn't know anything about Ed Kemper. Of course, I went to Wikipedia and researched it
Yeah.
all. But I owe a thanks to Joe Castro, who does special effects for Chad Farron, the writer, director, producer. And Chad wanted to cast me. I auditioned, and I auditioned for the role of Sally Hallett, who's the mother's best friend. And I found out that she was the eighth and last victim. And fortunately, I did not have a very gruesome or gory death because he just breaks my neck or strangles me for lack of time. So I was really grateful that Joe Castro didn't get to work his magic on me. Blood is so hard to get out.
Yeah, yeah. This is such an interesting movie because it's a period piece. It's set in the 70s during the time of the actual killing spree. To for us to prep, you sent us behind the scenes photos of the costumes and all of that kind of stuff. And I love movies that are period pieces. How did like the costuming and the sets kind of help you fall into this character that's a real life person?
I don't get to do a lot of period movies. This one was set in the early 70s. His 11-month killing spree was from 1972 to 1973. So I really got to work with wardrobe, which I hardly ever do. Usually it's from my own closet, or if I know it's going to get bloody, I go to the thrift store and buy something. But I loved working with a wardrobe, and the purse and shoes and everything was great period stuff. And then the cars. Oh my goodness. I'm
Yeah.
a big gearhead. I love classic cars. I had a 56 T-Bird for a long time. And I always wanted an E-type Jaguar. So Sally got to drive an E-type Jaguar in 1973. It was absolutely gorgeous. It fulfilled a fantasy for me. And I realized that they're a whole lot better looking than they are comfortable, because you sink down so low that if you're a woman wearing a tight skirt, it's almost impossible to hoist yourself out of the front seat. You have to go over this ridge, where the door is.
Oh man, that's funny. That's so funny.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like Sam said, we both had a chance to watch the picture, and it does fully immerse yourself into that time period. The costumes, the cars, the language, the lingo. Obviously, it was a scary time, and I feel like the 70s, 80s is always a place that the serial killer story is always explored, just because it was so rampant and unfortunately just ever prevalent. Are there certain stories that you remember from that era really sticking with you in terms of real life real life serial killer, stalker, those type of stories that maybe brought you back a little bit while working on this movie?
Well, I knew more about killers like Ted Bundy and
Yeah.
the Zodiac Killer and things like that. I really wasn't familiar with Kemper, and it was a little bit before my time. I was still in school, so I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really. Plus, it happened in Santa Cruz, so that's pretty far away. However, the next movie I did with Chad, which we shot last year, is called Dorothea, and it's also a serial killer. She killed 9 people, and I was familiar with her. She ran a boarding house in Sacramento, and she took in elderly and um, disabled people and then killed them and cashed their social security checks. So this is 2 real life crime dramas that I've done with Chad Farron. And it is something very different for me. I've never really done this kind of thing before. But I find that there's quite a huge interest these days in true crime. There's a lot of podcasts about it. There's a lot of books. Kemper's been done before, but I'd like to think that we added something to the genre, that it captured the spirit of the age. And Brandon Kirk, who plays Kemper, is just amazing. When I first saw him on the set, I thought, well, he's kind of weird and awkward, but that was the way he's supposed to be. And then he noticed me and he runs up to me, grabs me in this big hug, and he's screaming, "Oh my God, Brinke Stevens, I finally get to work with you. I'm so honored." So we had a really nice beginning, even though he kills me later.
Is that a reaction you're kind of used to by now? You're a horror icon at this point. Like, do you get that a lot from co-stars running up, giving you hugs, being excited to work with you?
Yeah, actually I do, and it always amazes me that that I have the reputation that I do, because to me it's like a white collar job. I just show up and I do the work and I collect the paycheck.
Yeah.
So I'm not in it for the ego or for the glory. So when someone says, "Oh, it's just so great to work with you," I'm like, thank you, I think. Please don't kill me.
Yeah, Brink, that's one of the questions we had was working with Brandon Kirk, who plays Ed Kemper. He's the version of Ed Kemper that ends up killing your character of Sally. What was it like working on set directly while filming those scenes where, of course, it's very well known that Sally is his final victim? What was it like working on set shooting those scenes with Brandon, because he feels very invested in the character and feels very well realized playing Ed Kemper. What was it like working with him?
Well, I'll reflect back on Slumber Party Massacre, when I worked with Michael Villella, who played a serial killer, and he kept apart from everyone else. He wouldn't speak to any of the other actors. He tried to maintain the mystique of his evilness. But Brandon Kirk was just the opposite, where he was like this big, friendly guy that, just you could hang out with him and talk, and then he'd switch into this Ed Kemper mode. And, it's the mark of a truly great actor, where he was very normal on the set. I was glad for that. And Susan Priver, who plays his mother, I had never met her before. Of course, I researched her. I saw that she'd been a model and she'd written a book and all that. So I contacted her and I said, "Can we run lines someplace before the movie started filming?" So she invited me up to her beautiful home in the Hollywood Hills, and we met for the first time and ran lines for a couple of hours. And I was really glad, because we're supposed to play best friends, and I'd never met her. So it established a rapport between she and I that was really good. And I supposedly have known Ed Kemper. Sally Hallett has known Ed for many, many years, being the mother's best friend. So there was a nice camaraderie there where I genuinely liked him. You get the feeling that Sally has no idea that he's such a monster.
I feel like that's something that the movie does really well, is like your Sally is kind of on the sidelines of the pretty tumultuous relationship between Ed and his mother. And to a point where there are times where you almost feel like a second mother figure to Ed, in a way that I don't know. I found that dynamic really interesting. Um, what was it? I
Mm.
mean, what was that like portraying something that was I mean, that's based in reality? Like, you obviously can't talk to the actual person you are portraying because she tragically is not here with us anymore. But how did you? What were the tricks that you used to like imbue it with the realism that it needed?
One of the first things that I did was look up Sally Hallett on the internet, and she was younger than I was when she died by more than 10 years, but she looked 10 years older than me because I guess it was an era when people smoked and drank a lot.
Yeah.
And Ed Kemper's mother is supposed to be an alcoholic, so we're always seen drinking. And she's always smoking. It was a different time period. So clearly, I did not look like her. I was much younger and prettier looking, even though I was actually older than her. So at that point, I just kind of threw it out the window and I said, I'm just going to follow the script. There was not a lot of information about Sally Hallett other than what they found in the trial transcripts. So Chad, the writer director, did an amazing job fleshing her out as a character, and everything was real. It was all true. Like Sally and Susan, Ed Kemper's mother, were supposed to go on a trip to Europe, and at the last minute, Sally drops out with no explanation, and there's a rift there. So that was portrayed in the script, and I said, well, shouldn't you say why she didn't go? Just one line would fix that. And they said, well, we don't know. It was never revealed why Sally didn't go on the trip, so we're not going to say. So I found that interesting that there were gaps in the knowledge of who and what Sally was, what she did for a living, things like that. So I think they did a remarkable job fleshing her out into a very fully realized character.
Yeah, I think that's something that the movie does such a well done job on is fleshing out all these characters, and also at the core of this movie really is it's a father, or excuse me, a mother son relationship, and you get to play almost the middle person to that. When you were first researching this case of Ed Kemper and you got to how his mother was and how she treated Ed, what was your first response to her? Because I have a very visceral response to Ed's mother. She is just as bad as he was. What was your response to her, though?
That seems to be the consensus about Clarnell, Ed's mother, that she was extremely dysfunctional, possibly personality disorder, things like that, an alcoholic. In real life, she belittled him, she would beat him with a belt. And I'm sure that a lot of his psychosis stemmed from her. However, an interesting thing about the Ed Kemper story is that when he was 15 years old, he committed his first murders. He killed both of his grandparents, and he went into a high security, maximum security mental hospital for the criminally insane and remained there until he was 21. And then when they released him, he went to live with his mother. So I'm sure that, whatever original damage was there inside of him, that she made it much, much worse.
Yeah, the script is so like I mean the story itself is so dark, but the script does have a bit of a wit to it where there's a cut directly from the psychologist having Ed leave and basically ending with like just stay away from your mom. And the next shot is him knocking on his mom's door going, "Hey mom." And it's just like they're a little sly like it's not necessarily a humorous film because it's very disturbing, but there is a wit to it. Was that present in the script, or did you kind of pick up on any of those elements to it?
Yes, for the most part, we just followed the script very closely. Sometimes Chad would change things a little bit, like my death scene. There was much more humor in the death scene. I say, "Is your mother around?" He invites me over for dinner after he's killed his mother and decapitated her, and I come in and I said, "Is your mother around?" And he goes, "Yeah, parts of her are." And Chad felt that that was just too breaking the mood. So he said, we're not going to do that. Forget those lines. I'm going to make it much creepier and much scarier. So sometimes the humor, had to be cut out, but it was tongue in cheek. And I thought Susan did a wonderful job playing the mother. And also, Ed Kemper was an interesting figure in that he was your typical serial killer personality, where he was, as a child, antisocial, cruelty to animals, things like that. And the horrendous things he did to his victims, I mean, necrophilia, decapitation, dismemberment. Oh my God. And yet he had a very high IQ. He was somewhat charming. He got all these women to get in the car with him, and so it was quite a dichotomy there in his character, where he could be so evil and mean and cruel, and yet there were some pleasant aspects to him.
Yeah, what I always heard was, and you always hear this about people who know these real life serial killers, is most of the time they're an outcast, or it's I never thought this person would do something like this. And I've heard that many times about Ed Kemper. I mean, he hung out with the local police officers. He tried to be on the police force. He was also called a gentle giant. I think he was like 6'8", 6'9", a very tall individual. And I think your death scene with Ed Kemper probably showcases that the most, because of how they portray your height to his height in that scene in particular. How tall is the actor that plays Ed in this movie? How tall is Brandon actually? And how did you guys work around him being 6'9" to compared to everybody else?
Yes, it's very true that the real Ed Kemper was quite tall. And
Yeah.
Brandon is tall as well. I would say 6'2" maybe. And he wore lifts in his shoes to make him even taller. So in my death scene, when he strangles me, I'm 5'3". So he's got, quite a bit of more room than I do to maneuver. And they were trying to figure out how to portray that in the best way. And they decided that if they showed my feet kicking, and then Chad said, "Can you make one of your shoes fall off?" Which I did. My feet are very talented, so they were able to pull that off. But they tried to have two guys, one on either side of me, lifting me up, and that was just too awkward. It didn't work. So finally, Brandon, I think he stood on a box behind me, and he just wrapped his arms around me and hoisted me up. And at that point, they showed my feet kicking, the cutaway. So it worked out. It ended up working out okay.
So you're getting ready to go to the premiere for the cast and crew. Like you said, you've never seen this before. What are you the most excited about seeing this for the first time with the people that you made this movie?
I've only seen the trailer so far, and what I'm most excited about is just watching the whole thing in its entirety, because so many of the days I was not there. I worked a week on it, but only scenes with the mother and with Ed. So I never saw him driving around in his car. I never saw him picking up the hitchhikers or killing them or any of that. I wasn't privy to it. So I'm really excited to just see the whole thing in context from beginning to end. And to watch myself. I have to be honest. I hope I look good.
Well, as two people who have seen it, you do look amazing, and
Yeah.
you are
Yep.
wonderful in the film. And
Well,
there's something
Yes.
I want to bring up, because you mentioned his name very early on in the podcast, and that is Joe Castro, who you've worked with many years now. He did the special effects for this movie. Of course, he was on our podcast a while ago, and I just have to say, I sent him a message after this to talk about the special effects in it, because they are so good and they are so believable and they are so just gut wrenching. Is there ever a time where, in your entire time working with Joe, where you look at his special effects and just wonder, how do you do this?
yes. Joe's been a friend of mine since he was 16 years old. And he was this kid living in Texas, and I was a mascot for Monsterland magazine. I played Evola, and we had a contest at the magazine where someone would win a free trip to Hollywood and a photo shoot with Evola and meet John Beekler and people like that. So Joe won the contest, and they flew him out to California with his mother, and we hung out. And he and I stayed in touch, and eventually he did move to Hollywood and become a special effects artist. So he worked on some of my movies, like Teenage Exorcist, that was one of his, and a number of movies for Fred Olen Ray, and all the people that were doing, stuff in the 80s and 90s. So then he gave me my very first directing opportunity with Personal Demons. He has been doing this anthology series called Terror Tunes, and I've been in almost all of them. I've been in 2, 3, and 4. And he offered me a chance to submit an idea for a 30-minute short. So I submitted a sentence, and he liked it. He said, give me a paragraph. He liked that. He said, give me a whole page. I did. He said, I want you to write the whole 30-page script. So I did. And then he called me up and he said, we need to talk. And I'm like, uh-oh, did he hate it? What? So I go over to his house and he says, I like this so much that I want you to direct it because I want you to stay true to your vision. And I said, well, I wrote the lead character for myself and she's in the entire movie. And he said, you can act and direct at the same time. So, I'm so thankful to him. I since went on to direct Sorority Babes and the Slime Bowl-orama 2. But Joe gave me my start. And he is an unsung genius in special effects. It must come from his, demented, warped mind and nightmares and things like that. The creatures he creates, and he's so good and so facile at doing it. He also did the effects on Chad's next movie, Dorothea, and I'm supposedly killed with an overdose of codeine. So he researched what that would look like, and he built this prosthetic tongue for me that was all swollen and purple, and it just popped in my mouth, and then he put some like slime and saliva on me and stuff, and I'm like, so that was, quite brilliant. He's just absolutely amazing. I love him to pieces, and it's always a joy to work with him.
Yeah, he's wonderful, and like you said, he is the unsung talent of special effects. He has popped up so many times in the history of our podcast, and we're always like, we can tell that's Joe's work because it's always incredible and always just absolutely over the top and amazing in the best ways possible. And you mentioned Personal Demons there, Brink. I gotta ask, are we going to see you in the director's chair again? Are you planning to direct anything else coming up?
Well, I don't know. I'm willing to do it, but I have to say that making Sorority Babes 2 was so difficult because I only had 6 days to shoot it and about $100. I mean, more than that, but that's what it felt like. And it was just
Full
brutal.
moon model.
We
Yeah.
were, shooting till 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's really hard to get a good performance out of your actors. And it was so hard. So I feel like I did the best job I could given the limitations under the circumstances. And I was proud of my work. It'll never be as good as the first movie, which was a true cult classic. But, they wanted to do a sequel, and I'm so happy they tapped me. I was very blessed that it was kind of right around the Me Too movement and a time when women were being empowered. So they wanted a female director. Plus, there was a lot of nudity. There were 2 shower scenes and 1 love scene, and none of the guys wanted to direct that. So they're like, get Brink to do it. so I'm no stranger to shower scenes, obviously. Much of my career being based on that in the early days. But and it was much more relaxed doing Personal Demons because we only shot it on weekends. It was a 30-minute short. So over the course of a couple of months of weekends, we were able to film it. And I really had a coup getting Linnea Quigley and Debbie Rochon in the movie. Those 2 parts had been written for men. And they were both out here for a convention. It might have been like Monster Palooza or something. And Joe's like, grab them while you can, while they're out here. So I got them to stay an extra day. And provided their costumes so they wouldn't have to bring that kind of luggage along. And we shot them both in one day. And it was my first day of shooting. So I was so grateful that I got to work with two close old friends on my first day of directing.
It's awesome.
Do you think that was obviously easier to work with two close friends that you've known for a very long time? As a director, what was that like, working with those two on your first day, having them almost as your guinea pigs to kind of ease yourself into it?
They were both really wonderful, and very supportive. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I love so much about the horror industry, is that it's much more supportive than filmmaking in general. Usually there's not a lot of cutthroat competition in horror. People support one another and recommend one another. So, the women are not catty and with the claws out. They're helpful. And, some of them are my best friends. Like Michelle Bauer and I talk every day. We're like sisters. So I love that kind of really close camaraderie in the horror field. And also the fact that, I'm still acting. Yeah, and I've been acting for 40 years. And there's still an interest in my work, in mainstream. And when I turned 40, they would have put me out to pasture. But I can write, direct. I've sold 6 screenplays, 4 of which have been produced. And I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. So it's really wonderful. And I think horror is one of the few genres that women have it as good as they do.
Absolutely. Well, Casey and I have we've actually screened Sorority Babes 2 at one of our film festivals that we put on in the past few years, as part of our late night programming, and it's slayed. So we would love to see you in the director's chair again anytime. Because yeah, you've put out some good work, Brink.
Oh,
It's
thank
it's
you. Well,
fantastic.
and I have to thank Billy Butler, my producer on that. He's brilliant. And
Yeah.
I don't think Full Moon realized how brilliant he was. But he had already done like 6 movies by the time we started shooting in late August that year. And he looked up all the costumes. He bought costumes online that were kind of 80s oriented. It had a real 80s vibe to it. And he was just brilliant. And I was lucky to get him in Personal Demons to play this hick who works at a gas station, Humbert, I think his name was. And he was so sweet. He even wardrobed himself. He bought some denim coveralls on Amazon and came totally prepared for the part, a dirty baseball cap. And he really looked like, some kind of scary backyard hick. So really very, very talented. And it's always a joy to work with Billy Butler. Have you guys
Yeah.
interviewed him yet?
Yeah,
We
we've had
have.
him on the show.
Yeah,
He's a hoot.
we love Billy Butler. He's amazing. Yeah,
He's
he was a
funny.
hoot to have.
He's got the most acidic sense of
He
humor.
does.
If you read his autobiography, which is wonderful, I recommend it to everybody. His sense of humor is just so whacked.
It's true. It's true. He was hilarious when we had him on the podcast. But
Yeah.
Brink, you have the premiere to get to, so I'm going to wrap things up with our final question for you. If people are going to go watch Ed Kemper, which is in theaters right now as we're speaking, what movie of yours would you pair with it for a double feature? If people are going to watch Ed Kemper and then this movie afterwards, which one of your movies would you pick to watch right after?
I would say Slumber Party Massacre, which was my very first movie, but probably the one I'm most known for. It's like Brinke Stevens, star of Slumber Party Massacre, even though I'm only in it like 20 minutes before I get killed. But the reason I would pair them up is Ed Kemper is a serial killer, real life, who kills a lot of women, whereas Slumber Party Massacre is, fictitious, but it's about a serial killer who tries to kill a lot of women and does some, but the women best him in the end and triumph. So I think it would be a real feel-good conclusion that the women gang up on the serial killer in Slumber Party Massacre and do him in.
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer.
Yep.
Slumber Party Massacre is it's such a, I know that it's a cult classic, but it still feels like so underrated in the grand scheme of things. That movie is
It's
just
such a wonderful movie, and
yeah,
legitimately terrifying for a slasher movie. Not many
yeah,
slasher movies get under my skin the way that movie does, but yeah, and it still holds the test of time. That is a perfect. And again, the women win in the end of that one, so we need that
yeah,
after watching Kemper. That's for sure.
yeah,
I agree. And you're right about Slumber Party. There was just some amazing combination of elements, like a female writer, a female director,
Mhm.
um, and the women, the actresses. It just worked. And the same with the first sorority babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, the very first one. It was magic. And we didn't know when we were making these movies that they would kind of become cult classics, but they did. And I've done many a screening in different cities across the United States where they'll show a movie and I'll do a Q&A afterward. And even audiences that are so young that they weren't even born when these movies were made love them. And boy, you're right. It really does. These movies stand the test of time. So I'm quite happy to be associated with them all these years later, to still people want to talk about them and tell me the very first memories they have of where they were and what they were, how old they were when they were watching these films.
Yeah, you've had such a wonderful career, and Brink, we have to thank you for coming on and talking about this movie with us. It was so wonderful to meet you in person last October, and we can't wait to do it again at some point. So please keep on working and keep on bringing stuff to the world, because we are those people that love it. So Brink, thank you so much for joining us on the
Thank
podcast.
you.
Go enjoy yourself at the premiere. We loved the movie. Have so much fun, and yeah, enjoy the movie.
I can't wait to see it. Okay, well, thank you guys. It's so lovely to work with you again, and all best. You have one up on me that you've seen the film already, so I'm off to enjoy it myself. Thank you.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.